He says he realized it was the end of his career when he picked up the Washington Post and saw that he was being blamed for the decision to go to war. In classic Washington fashion, somebody leaked a story suggesting that the president decided to attack after Tenet said the evidence against Iraq was, quote, a slam dunk. In our interview, Tenet admits the CIA's mistakes and his own. But what makes him angry now, he says, is how the White House ignored CIA warnings and then used slam dunk to brand him with the failure.
The hardest part of all this has just been listening to this for almost 3 years. Listening to the vice president go on Meet the Press on the 5th year of 9/11, and say, well, George Tenet said slam dunk, as if he needed me to say slam dunk to go to war with Iraq. And they never let it go. I mean, I became campaign talk. I was a talking point. Look what the idiot told us, and we decided to go to war. Well, let's not be so disingenuous. Let's stand up. This is why we did it. This is how we did it. And let's everybody tell the truth.
Hey, I've got 60
The
minutes
truth
on.
of Iraq begins, according to Tenet,
The head of CIA is on there right now telling about Bush. Okay. No problem. Bye.
They bear responsibility. It's September the 12th. I've got the manifests with me that tell me that Al-Qaeda did this. Nothing in my head that says that there's any Iraqi involvement in this in any way, shape, or form. And I remember thinking to myself as I'm about to go in and brief the president, what the hell is he talking about?
You said Iraq made no sense to you in that moment. Does it make any sense to you today?
In terms of complicity with 9/11? Absolutely none. It never made any sense. We could never verify that there was any Iraqi authority, direction, and control, complicity with Al-Qaeda for 9/11 or any operational act against America, period.
The president in October of 2002, quote, we need to think about Saddam Hussein using Al-Qaeda to do his dirty work. Is that what you're telling the president?
Well, we didn't believe Al-Qaeda was going to do Saddam Hussein's dirty work.
January 03, the president again, quote, imagine those 19 hijackers this time armed by Saddam Hussein. Is that what you're telling the president?
No.
The vice president upped the ante, claiming Saddam had nuclear weapons when the CIA was saying he didn't. What's happening here?
I don't know what's happening here. The intelligence community's judgment is he will not have a nuclear weapon until the year 2007, 2009.
That's not what the vice president's saying.
Well, I can't explain it.
Tenet says he sometimes warned the White House its statements were false, but he admits that he missed a big one in the 2003 State of the Union address.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
The CIA had knocked down that uranium claim months before. The agency even demanded it be taken out of 2 previous presidential speeches. How did it get through the third time?
I didn't read the speech. I was involved in a bunch of other things.
Wait a minute. The president's State of the Union address?
I know this shocks some hearts.
You didn't read that?
I didn't. Farmed it out, got it at a principal's meeting, brought it down the hall, handed it to my executive assistant and said, you guys go review this and come back to me if I need to do anything.
Nobody comes back to you.
And therein lies why I ultimately have to take my share of responsibility.
Did anyone at the White House, did anyone in the Defense Department ever ask you whether we should go to war in Iraq?
The discussions that are ongoing in 2002, in the spring and summer of 2002, are how you might do this, not whether you should do this.
Nobody asks.
Well, I don't remember sitting down at a principals committee meeting and everybody saying, okay, there's a deep concern about Iraq. Is this the right thing to do? What are the implications? I don't ever remember that galvanizing moment when people sit around and honestly say, is this the right thing to do?
But at CIA headquarters, Tenet's team was about to make a historic blunder of its own. The CIA produced its evaluation of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, in a secret report called a National Intelligence Estimate.
The first key judgment in the National Intelligence Estimate says, quote, Baghdad has chemical and biological weapons. Period.
High confidence judgment.
How could you make such a bold statement?
We believe he had chemical and biological weapons.
But there was no hard evidence.
No, there was lots of data. There's lots of technical data. So you put all of this together and pick evidence. It's not evidence in the court of law. Remember, when you write an estimate, when you estimate, you're writing what you don't know. You might win a civil case. You're not going to win a criminal case in terms of evidence.
We are going to war. Tens of thousands of people are going to be killed.
Yeah.
And you're telling me you had evidence to prove a civil case and not a criminal case?
Hindsight is perfect. The public face on this was what we wrote on weapons of mass destruction. And for professionals who pride themselves on being right, this is a very painful experience for us.
Perhaps the most painful experience for Tennant was the presentation of Secretary of State Colin Powell to the United Nations. Powell asked Tennant to sit behind him.
Our conservative estimate is that Iraq today has a stockpile of between 100 and 500 tons of chemical weapons agent. Conservative estimate of 100 to 500 tons?
Scott.
I mean, how can you be so wrong?
Scott, we've gone through this. It's what we believed. It's what we wrote.
Where do these numbers come from?
From our national intelligence estimate. I mean, you don't make this kind of stuff up.
Wait a minute, you did make this kind of stuff
up. We didn't make it up, Scott.
It's not true.
Scott, you do it, you're doing it again. You're impugning the integrity of people who make analytical judgments and make their best judgments about what they believe of the Iraqis possess. Intelligence, my business, is not always about the truth. It's about people's best judgments about what the truth may be. We believed it. We wrote it. We let the secretary down.
These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence. He didn't tell the United Nations, look, we think this might be true. This was laid out to the world as a ironclad case. Conservative estimates between 100 and 500.
I wish I could reel the tape back. You think that the American intelligence community is going to roll out the Secretary of State in front of the entire world and consciously let him say things that are wrong? No.
Did you apologize to Colin Powell?
Well, Colin and I have talked about it. I'm not going to talk about what he and I have said to each other, but we've talked about it.
When it became clear there were no weapons of mass destruction, a rift split the White House and CIA. A former ambassador named Joe Wilson wrote an article debunking the uranium claim that had slipped into the State of the Union address. The White House retaliated, leaking a story that exposed the identity of Joe Wilson's wife, Valerie Plame, an undercover CIA officer.
She's one of my officers. That's wrong. Big time wrong. You don't get to do that. And the chilling effect that you have inside my workforce is, whoa, now officers' names are being thrown out the door. Hold it. Not right.
How much damage did that do?
That's not the point. Just because there's a Washington bloodletting game going on here, and just because her husband's out there saying what he's saying, the country's intelligence officers are not fair game. Period. That's all you need to know.
They didn't seem to know that in the White House.
Look, I'm done with it. I've just told you what I think.
What Tennant didn't know was that the next bloodletting would be his. It came in another White House leak, this time to reporter Bob Woodward. An unnamed source described to Woodward a pre-war meeting in the Oval Office. The CIA was showing the president how to present the public case for weapons of mass destruction. Woodward wrote, Tennant rose up, threw his arms in the air. Quote, it's a slam dunk case.
I never got off the couch. I never jumped up. There was no pantomime. I didn't do my Michael Jordan, Air Jordan routine, for the president that morning.
What did you mean by slam dunk?
Well, I guess I meant that we could do better. I mean,
do better?
We can put a better case together for a public case. That's what I meant. That's what this was about.
Tennant says the president wasn't happy with the presentation, so he was telling Mr. Bush that improving the presentation would be a slam dunk. But Tennant says the leak to Woodward made the remark look like the decisive moment in the decision to go to war.
Head of that
I'll
CIA
never
is on
believe that what happened that day informed the president's view or belief of the legitimacy or the timing of this war. Never.
In addition to 5 from the CIA, the only people in the room were the President, Vice President, Condoleezza Rice, and Chief of Staff Andrew Card.
Somebody
I just wanted
who
to
was
tell
in the
you.
Oval Office that day
Okay, buddy.
decided to throw you off the train.
Well,
Was it the president?
I don't know.
Was it the vice president?
I don't know.
Who was out to get you, George?
Scott, I'm Greek and we're conspiratorial by nature, but who knows? And I haven't let myself go there, but as a human being, it didn't feel very good.
Tennant says when he saw Slam Dunk in the Washington Post, he knew the breach with the White House was total. He called his principal contact in the president's office.
And I remember picking up the phone and calling Andy Card, who is a terrific human being and somebody I've always trusted.
The president's chief of staff at the
President's
time.
chief of staff. Call Andy. I said, I believed that he had weapons of mass destruction. And now what's happened here is you've gone out and made me look stupid. It's the most despicable thing I've ever heard in my life. Men of honor don't do this.
Men of honor
You
don't do this.
You don't throw people overboard. You don't do this. You don't call somebody in. You work your heart out. You show up every day. You're going to throw somebody overboard just because it's a deflection? Is that honorable? It's not honorable to me. At the end of the day, the only thing you have is trust and honor in this world. That's all you have. All you have is your reputation built on trust and your personal honor. And when you don't have that anymore, well, there you go. Trust was broken.
Between you and the White House.
You bet. You bet.
Still, the president awarded Tennant the nation's highest honor for a civilian, the Medal of Freedom.
I wonder whether you were conflicted about accepting it.
Well, there was conflict.
At Georgetown, he told us he accepted the medal because the citation was for the CIA's work in Afghanistan, not for Iraq. Some have asked whether the medal is why Tennant has withheld criticism of President Bush.
Some people have wondered whether the Medal of Freedom is the reason you tend to give the president a pass.
Well, that's the most outrageous thing I've ever heard in my life. The notion that I would trade in my integrity to pull punches with anybody is just ridiculous.
He had the second longest tenure at the agency, but on July 11th, 2004, George Tennant took a cigar and walked the grounds of the CIA one last time.
You know that there are people watching this interview, and they're going to say to themselves, that's the guy that missed 9/11. That's the guy who got it wrong on Iraq. To them, you say what?
History will judge who this guy is. All I would say to them is I'm also the guy that was privileged to lead men and women that saved thousands of lives. I'm also the guy that was privileged to lead men and women who get up every day to try and keep them safe. I'm also the guy that knows that my report card is a heck of a lot better than the bad things, and there are a lot of good things. And I would hope that the American people believe that here's a guy who tried to serve his country as best as he knew how, is an honest man, and led his people as well as he possibly could. And the rest is for other people to judge.